Imagine waking up tomorrow and the only thing around you for as far as your eyes can see is water. No land, no signal, no rescue plane, no boat on the horizon. Now imagine that goes on, not for a day, not for a week, not even for a month, for 14 months straight. This is not a movie. This is not a novel. This actually happened to a real man, and by the time you finish this video, you will understand how a human being can drift across an entire ocean, eat things you wouldn't feed a dog, watch the only other person on board slowly die right next to him, and still, somehow, come out the other side alive. Stay till the end, because the way this story ends will genuinely give you chills. November 17, 2012. A small fishing town on the Pacific coast of Mexico. A 36-year-old Salvadoran fisherman named José Salvador Alvarenga climbs into a 25-foot fiberglass boat, the kind of small open vessel local fishermen use for short coastal trips. Nothing about this morning feels special. He's done this hundreds of times before. It's supposed to be a routine 2-day trip, head out into the Pacific, catch shark and mahi-mahi, come back, sell the haul at the local market, and repeat the same cycle he's lived for years. With him is a younger man, Ezequiel Cordoba, only 22 years old. Ezequiel isn't even an experienced fisherman. He's nervous, a little green, but he needs the money badly, so Alvarenga brings him along and agrees to pay him $50 for the trip. Neither of them has any idea that this is the last time either will stand on solid, familiar ground for over a year. A storm rolls in. At first it doesn't seem unusual, just choppy water, a stronger wind than expected, but it builds fast. 10-foot waves start slamming into the small boat, one after another, rocking it violently side to side. The engine floods with salt water and dies completely. Their radio, their only lifeline to the outside world, gets soaked and goes dead in their hands. In a matter of hours, two men go from "we'll be back for dinner tomorrow" to being completely, utterly alone in the middle of the largest ocean on the planet, with no way to steer and no way to call for help. With no engine and no way to steer, the boat becomes a leaf caught in the wind. The Pacific Current, a massive, invisible river running through the ocean itself, grabs the boat and starts dragging it steadily westward, away from Mexico, away from any shipping lane a rescue team might think to search. At first, there's still hope. Alvarenga waves at distant silhouettes on the horizon, shouts until his voice goes hoarse. Nothing works. Nobody sees them. Nobody comes. Days pass. Then a full week. Then two. The little food they'd packed for a 2-day trip runs out almost immediately. The fresh water is gone within days too. And now the real question sets in, the one that would terrify absolutely anyone. How exactly do you survive on a small open boat, with zero supplies, drifting further and further from any trace of civilization with every passing hour? Alvarenga starts improvising, drawing on decades of experience as a fisherman. He catches fish with nothing but his bare hands and scraps of fishing lines salvaged from the wreckage. He catches seabirds, two exhausted birds that land on the boat to rest, and he eats them raw on the spot, organs, blood, feathers and all, because out here, nothing can be wasted. He captures sea turtles that swim close to the boat, cracks them open, and drinks their blood straight from the shell whenever there's no rainwater to collect, because dehydration, not hunger, is what actually kills you first out on the open ocean. Let that sink in for a second. This man is drinking turtle blood just to survive one more day, floating in a boat with nothing but a few inches of fiberglass between him and an ocean that could swallow him whole at any moment, with no idea whether he'll even be alive by the time the sun comes up tomorrow. This is where the story turns from harrowing to almost unbearable to think about. Ezequiel, the much younger crewmate, simply cannot handle this the way Alvarenga can. He physically cannot bring himself to eat the raw birds. He gags at the smell of turtle blood and refuses it outright. His body, already weakened by the shock and the constant sun exposure, slowly begins shutting down from severe malnutrition. Alvarenga begs him to eat, pleads with him again and again, tells him that refusing food out here is a slow death sentence. He tries everything he can think of to keep the younger man alive, but fear, grief, and pure physical revulsion are powerful things, and roughly 4 months into their drift, Ezequiel Cordoba dies right there in the boat, lying next to the one man who tried everything and still couldn't save him. Now try to picture this exact moment for Alvarenga. He isn't just stranded anymore. He is alone. Truly, completely, terrifyingly alone on a small open boat in the middle of open ocean, with the lifeless body of the only other human being he's spoken a single word to in months. He can't bury him. He can't call anyone for help. He makes an agonizing decision to keep the body in the boat for several days, unable to let go, before he's finally forced by circumstance to release it into the sea. From this exact point forward, it's just him. One man. Thousands upon thousands of miles of open water stretching out in every direction, and absolutely no end in sight. Physical survival, it turns out, is only half of this battle. What actually happens to a human mind after months and months of total isolation, with no other voice, no other face, nothing but sky and water as far as the eye can see? Alvarenga later described talking to himself constantly, out loud, just to hear some version of a human voice, even if it was only his own. He describes vivid hallucinations. He describes having full conversations with imaginary visitors who would sit with him on the boat, purely so his own brain wouldn't completely collapse under the crushing weight of the silence. He thought constantly unexpectedly about his daughter back home, a young girl he hadn't seen grow up and wasn't sure he ever would again. He thought, more than once, about ending it all right there in the boat. But something, call it stubbornness, call it raw survival instinct, kept pulling him back from that edge, every single time. Every single day, without fail, the boat kept drifting. Weeks quietly turned into months. The seasons themselves changed around him while he sat trapped in the exact same nightmare, day after day, with nothing to mark the passage of time except the rising and setting of the sun. Now here's the number that makes this entire story almost impossible to believe. By the time it was finally over, Alvarenga's boat had drifted more than 6,700 miles across the open Pacific Ocean. To put that number into perspective, that's roughly the same distance as drifting from Los Angeles all the way to Tokyo, and then some. He crossed nearly the entire width of the largest ocean on Earth, completely powerless, with no navigation equipment whatsoever, entirely at the mercy of wind and current for over a year of his life. And then, finally, in January of 2014, 14 long months after what was supposed to be a simple 2-day fishing trip, his battered little boat washed ashore. Not in Mexico, not anywhere close to home. He landed on a remote, barely inhabited atoll in the Marshall Islands, a tiny speck of land lost in the middle of the vast Pacific, thousands of miles from where his entire journey had begun. Local residents on the island found him crawling out of the wreckage, barely able to stand or walk on his own. His body was wasted away to almost nothing. His hair and beard had grown long and wild and matted. He was barely recognizable as human after everything he had endured out there alone. 438 days. That's exactly how long he had been out there, adrift, alone for most of it, surviving on raw fish, raw birds, turtle blood, and rainwater. It remains the longest anyone in recorded history has ever survived drifting alone at sea. You would think the hardest part of this ordeal was finally over the moment he reached land. In some very real ways, though, it was only the beginning of an entirely different kind of struggle. Doctors had to very slowly and carefully reintroduce solid food into his severely starved body. He had lost so much muscle mass that he could barely stand upright on his own 2 feet. His family back home in El Salvador had genuinely believed he was dead. There had been absolutely no sign of him, no wreckage found, nothing at all, for well over a year. When he was finally, tearfully reunited with his daughter, a girl who had grown up significantly during the time he was gone, it was an overwhelming, deeply emotional moment that even now, years later, is difficult to read about without feeling something in your chest. His extraordinary story exploded across international news outlets almost overnight. Journalist Jonathan Franklin spent months conducting extensive interviews with Alvarenga and eventually turned his full account into a book titled 438 Days, which went on to become one of the most talked about survival accounts ever documented and published. But not everyone believed him right away. Plenty of skeptics questioned how any human being could possibly survive that long at sea without eventually dying of starvation, dehydration, or simply losing their mind completely. There were even later legal disputes involving Ezekiel's grieving family. And still, to this day, investigators, doctors, and ocean drift experts who carefully studied the currents and timelines involved have largely corroborated the overall plausibility of his account. So what do we actually take away from a story like this one? It's incredibly easy to watch or hear something like this and immediately think, I could never survive that. And honestly, realistically, most people couldn't. But that's exactly what makes José Salvador Alvarenga's story so haunting, so unforgettable, and so genuinely fascinating to hear. It shows, in the most extreme way imaginable, just how far the human will to live can stretch when literally everything else has been stripped away. No food, no water, no other person to talk to, no hope of rescue for over a year of his life. And somehow, against every possible odd, he made it back. Next time your own day feels unbearable, or impossibly heavy, try to remember there was once a man who floated alone across an entire ocean, drinking turtle blood just to see one more sunrise, and he made it through. If this story hit you the way it hit me while researching it, make sure you're subscribed, because there are survival stories out there even stranger and more extreme than this one, and I'm going to tell you every single one of them.